This chapter captures and represents what it's like to be a Berserk fan waiting for new chapters, just aimlessly stumbling around in the dark and falling over on our own faces while being barefoot. Berserk Chapter 383 picks up where we left off with Guts entering this stupa, someplace that Daiba took him in order to accomplish something. Now, we did theorize that this was going to be Guts giving himself a moment to reflect on himself. And it does seem like we're going in that direction. And as I've stated plenty of times on the channel, I do believe that a large theme of the story of Berserk is being able to overcome and move past the darkness in one's past, the trauma that you've gone through, and also dealing with the shadow self, which has always been a core idea and implement within the story, especially personified with the Beast of Darkness. And it's my theory that, by the time this segment is over, however long it's going to take, that it will involve an implementation of the Beast of Darkness within Guts, basically symbolizing being able to take that pain, anguish, darkness, trauma, all of that stuff that rules you completely and is the determining factor of the things that you do in life, and instead incorporating that in order to be useful to you instead of a detriment. Something that can push you forward, make you stronger. And in a thematic way, I do believe that Guts is going to go through a transformation of sorts. Now, when you say the word transformation when it comes to manga and anime, that can lead to the wrong impression. People thinking that Guts is going to go Super Saiyan with golden hair, have some insane change to his body and his form and stuff. No. I'm not saying that. I'm saying this is a thematic transformation. I'm saying that Guts needed to hit rock bottom. He needed to get to a point where he was accepting of death in order to get himself to reflect on himself and his entire life, and what is going to be his next steps moving forward. I often see people saying that this is not Guts, and Guts would never do this. I don't personally believe that Guts is out of character right now. And a lot of the examples that I see people bring up are Guts from a previous point in time without the amount of experiences that he has now. The post-eclipse Guts with his war declaration is a much different Guts than the one that we have currently in the manga. He still had a sword. He was fueled with rage. And as anybody who has maybe been extremely angry, pissed off, motivated, whatever the case may be, eventually you run out of gas in the tank. Eventually, you run out of energy. The only two things that Guts had, the potential of healing Casca and a sword, have both been proven useless to him. Casca was healed, but he couldn't talk to her. Then she got taken away by Griffith. The sword proved to be useless against Griffith, at least from Guts's perspective. And let's not forget all of the damage that the Berserker armor and the various battles he has gone through have done to him time after time. We have the visual representation of Guts's hair turning white, but there have also been several instances where it shows that his vision was getting blurry, that his body was shaking, that he was having a hard time holding on to his sword. Damage stacks up over time. I think a lot of people want to see Guts as this superhero. And although one of the things that gravitates me towards the story is that indomitable will of the human spirit, and the fact that Guts continues to thrive and keep going no matter what, if we want to continue with the idea that Guts is a human, this is the natural result of all of the pain and suffering that he's experienced up until this point. But I also think it's silly to think that Guts will always be in this state. I can get that it's annoying to see because we only get 2 to 3 chapters a year. And because of that it can feel like the story is moving at a snail's pace. And I will definitely say that this chapter did feel a little bit lackluster. Now, I do like the things that are happening here, but when you go to read it, there's only a couple of lines of dialogue and then it ends almost immediately with no indication when the next chapter is going to come. And trust me, that is frustrating. But this is a story that we are reading. This is a journey of a character. And a character has to go through different arcs. He has to go through different headspaces. He has to go through different experiences. In fact, one of the things I love about Berserk also is the fact that, depending on what point in the story you're reading, Guts is a very different person. And that's part of humanity. That's part of who he is. He is a human through and through. And we're going to see different stages of his life because we've been following him since he was a baby. We're seeing this man's life story. Obviously, at some point, Guts is going to recover. Guts is going to pick up his sword again. We are going to have a confrontation between Guts and Griffith. I think it's silly to believe that he's going to be stuck in this depressed state forever. You got to enjoy the process of the story. The frustrating part is the release schedule. But the story itself, I think, is on course, and going in a similar direction that Miura would have had it go in. Recently, there were comments by Kojimi saying that Miura struggled with this portion of the story and the way to tell it, and the fact that it's as thematically important as the eclipse, not in terms of scale probably, but in the transition of the story, in the changing of the status quo. And we can kind of see that here. There are definite parallels happening between Guts and when Griffith went through his transformation into Femto. Guts is entering the stupa, which he can't see anything, and I doubt it's reflecting much sound either. He falls on something that, to me, looks like a spinal cord with nerve endings moving out of it. I don't know if that's meant to be anything specific or if that is referencing something from a spiritual practice that I'm not aware of. But I think generally, a lot of spiritual practices work with the way the energy flows through the spine, the chakras, that sort of thing. And so I think that it's probably reflecting on that. But there could be something more specific going on, basically the way that everything flows through our body and is connected. And I think there is something mystical about this place and what it can do. We get one cutaway shot of Skirk and Daiba, and Skirk asking him what exactly is going on in there. There's an interesting line where Daiba says that the inside and outside is strongly disconnected. And I do also believe that reflects Guts and what he's going through. Daiba says that, without sight and without sound, there is naught to gaze but to the self. And that's something we've been talking about a long time, and something that I have hope for in the story, where Guts will have another moment of reflection. But now he's being forced to. It's not like he can escape from that at this point. He's going to be forced to look inside of himself. And whatever answer he gives himself is probably going to be the quote-unquote power-up that he gets. This is similar to a sensory deprivation tank that some people go into. It is meant to dull the senses from outside noise and distractions and have you focus on yourself. It promotes relaxation. It is supposed to actually help subdue anxiety. It gives you inward focus and heightened awareness. It essentially dulls your senses enough to bring you into a state of meditation and recovery. And however much you believe in that kind of stuff is an aside. We're looking at it in terms of a fantasy story on a level as extreme as Guts. So whatever little sensory deprivation tank that you may go into and make yourself feel better for a few hours, we're dealing with it on the scale of Berserk, which is a lot larger and a lot more fantastical. It's like all these bits of shadow come down from the ceiling, with Guts reaching out for them, and they engulf him. It makes it seem like he's underwater, which, ironically, you do lay in water in the sensory deprivation tanks to begin with. He says, finally, maybe believing that this is the moment of his own death. And just as the self-reflection begins, he thinks of the two people that have been the most important to him in his entire life, Casca and Griffith. And these are images of them from the Golden Age arc, back when they were the two closest people in his life. And the next page immediately shatters that memory and shows us the current reality of Griffith taking Casca and Guts having nothing. With that, he falls into the water further. And again, I don't think there's actually water here. I think this is in Guts' subconscious. And he seems to be getting wrapped with a shroud, which turns into a cocoon-like object, obviously meant to imply Guts is going to go through a transformation and be different once the cocoon opens. This, to me, will probably give us another look at Guts' past as well as all of the darkness that he's been through. I would not even be surprised if we saw flashes of Gambino, or anything from his childhood. I think he's going to be reminded what's important, and I think that we are going to get that conversation between him and the Beast of Darkness and the full integration of his shadow self, using the power of the beast to propel him forward, make him stronger, and get ready for whatever the next paradigm is.